This is part 2 of my true scary childhood story about the people that lived inside of my walls. No, they were not real people, they were obviously ghosts. I would constantly hear tapping coming from the other side of my wall. I would be woken up in the middle of the night to people pacing back and forth from inside of my wall. But my dad just kept telling me it's just rats. I was woken up at 3 a.m. one night to tapping coming from the inside of my wall. That night, I decided to be brave and tap back. I tapped 3 times, and you better believe 3 taps came right back at me. I was so scared. I didn't believe it, so I tapped 4 times, and guess what? 4 taps came right back at me. I ran upstairs screaming, mortified about what just happened, but once again, my parents didn't believe me. I probably shouldn't have communicated with the spirits because after that, things started to get really bad really quick. I'm out of time, but stay tuned for part 3 and follow my Instagram that's linked down below. This is part 2 of my scary childhood story about the door behind my dresser. Of course, my parents were really mad at us for opening it up, so they sealed it back up. They just didn't want us to get hurt from all the rusty nails or if there was mold inside. But I think we released something when we opened that door and a lot of things started to happen. First, I started having night terrors to the point where I would scream at the top of my lungs and not wake up. My parents would have to come downstairs and wake me up and put me back to bed. Then, every single night I would have this reoccurring dream that me, my mom, and my brother were all at a picnic at the beach. This super old lady would walk up to us and she would take me. She then would lock me up in the room behind my dresser. This dream would reoccur every single night for months. It scared me so much that I started to not sleep at night. I developed insomnia and would only sleep for 2 to 3 hours per night at only 8 years old. There was a couple nights where I swear I saw the old lady standing in the corner of my room. My parents just thought I was hallucinating from no sleep though. Stay tuned for part 3.
One summer after my sophomore year of college, I was working on an organic farm in Switzerland. But the farm was in this really remote area, so every few days I had to go to the closest town to run errands. But I didn't have a car or anything, so I would hitch rides. And even though hitchhiking was usually a pretty sketchy thing to do as a single woman in a foreign country, I normally felt pretty safe, except for this one time. I was on my way back to the farm and I hitched a ride on a motorcycle. And then this other guy on a motorcycle came up next to us and was trying to tell me something. And it's super windy, obviously, so I can't hear anything. And we were going like 40 miles per hour on these tiny roads. He's holding a necklace in his other hand, but he's like dangling around. I'm like, no, I don't want the necklace. I don't have any cash on me. But he kept following us and trying to sell it. So finally we get to the spot where I'm supposed to be dropped off. And this guy had been following us for like 30 minutes. And from the place where I'm dropped off, it's still a 10-minute walk to the farm. And the sun is setting, it's getting dark. So I start walking, and this guy keeps following me, and I start to get this really bad.
If you're ever driving late at night, don't do what they did. One night, a boy and his friend were on their way to a school dance when they saw a girl on the side of the road looking lost. They stopped the car and asked if she needed a ride, and she asked them to take her home. They said that they were going to a school dance and asked if she wanted to come too. She agreed. But these boys wouldn't know yet that this girl was not an average hitchhiker. So they all got in the car and the girl sat in the back seat. After a while, the girl would constantly say that she was cold, so one of the boys gave her his jacket. They got to the dance and things were pretty normal. But what happened after would make the boys question reality. When the night was almost over, it was finally time to take the girl home. When they almost arrived, the girl told them where she lived but told them to drop her off close by so she can walk the rest of the way. So that's what they did. But after the girl walked away, the boy who let her borrow his jacket realized that he never asked for his jacket back. His friend said that they could just come back tomorrow for it. The next morning, they came back expecting to get the jacket and leave, but things were not so simple. They came up to the girl's house and knocked on the door, but they were shocked at what they discovered as soon as the door opened. Follow for part 2.
This is a story of the time that this girl wanted to fight me in school for no reason. So a little backstory, me and this girl were like really close friends for a few years, and then we started to fall out and then become friends again, and it was really on and off. So she was dating this kid about a year or 2 before this situation happened. And me and this kid knew each other, but we weren't like friends, we just had mutual friends, so sometimes we would hang out like in a group. During this time, me and the girl were on, so we had plans to hang out the same day. So I was walking to one of my classes when this girl that I barely talked to came up to me and was like, oh my god, did you hear, like, this girl wanted to fight you? And I just laughed because I was like, what? Like, she's my friend, she never said anything to me, like, we were just talking last night. So I texted her and I said, so-and-so just told me that you wanted to fight me, what's going on? Like, why would she say that? Did you say anything? Are you mad at me? Blah, blah, blah. And she wasn't answering the phone. And she knew my entire schedule for school because we would meet up during class or whatever, but I'm leaving my lunch period and I turn around and I see her storming.
This is part 2 of why my lunch lady always hated me in high school. So like I said, this time I actually didn't have any money and I went to check out my food for lunch. The lunch lady knocks my plate over and says I'm just like my mom since we're both greedy. And I had no idea what she meant. Said she meant to throw her hands up, she didn't mean to knock over my plate. Everyone was looking at us and it was so awkward, so I just walked away. And I didn't even sit down for lunch, I just walked out of the cafeteria and went straight to my mom's classroom. I had no idea what the lunch lady was talking about. My mom doesn't even talk to her. Or at least, I thought she didn't. So like I said, I was on the way to my mom's classroom after the lunch lady yelled at me in front of the whole entire cafeteria. And once I got to my mom's classroom, I told her exactly what happened. She was in the middle of class. When I tell you my mom stormed out of her class, went straight to the cafeteria, pulled up on the lunch lady in front of everybody, and she grabs her by her hair. The lunch lady tried to grab to the cash register. The cash register fell and money went everywhere. All you could hear was the coins dropping on the floor, like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. I was so close to jumping in, but mom.
So at this point, she had been living at the lighthouse for like 6 months, and she was getting pretty creeped out because bizarre things started happening. She started noticing that some of her food was going missing, but she was the only person who lived in the lighthouse, obviously, and she was really specific about what food she bought when she went grocery shopping. She went to the grocery store at the beginning of each week, and for example, she would always buy 7 apples, 1 for each day of the week, and she was always really precise about that. But there were a few Sundays where she didn't have any apples left by the end of the week, which didn't make any sense because she always counted at the grocery store to make sure she had 7 apples. So she started getting more and more creeped out, but she didn't want to say anything because she had nowhere else to live. And then one night, she woke up in the middle of the night to something touching her feet. So my friend hears something behind her, but it's pitch black. She's like, hello? And then she finds the switch to the hallway lights, turns them on, and Dave is standing right there with his small dog. She's like, hey Dave, you kind of scared me. And Dave was like, oh, sorry, I was looking for the light switch myself. But that didn't make any sense because he wasn't standing anywhere close to the switch and he had been living in that apartment building for 30 years. So she starts walking up the stairs, and then Dave says, I've been working on a project that I'm really excited to show you. And my friend's like, oh, like an art project? And Dave's like, yeah, kinda. And she's like, okay, well maybe my mom and I can come by another time to see it. And then they say goodnight, but she just feels pretty weird about the whole interaction. A few months later, she's at school and she gets a text from her mom that she has to work late and won't be home to make dinner. That afternoon, my friend walks home, walks up the stairs to her apartment building, goes to unlock the door, but then realizes the door's already unlocked. Sometimes her mom would forget to lock the door, so it wasn't totally out of the ordinary, but it was winter and it was already getting dark outside even though it was only 4 p.m. So she turns on all the lights to her apartment. But then, all of a sudden, all the lights switch off. So I woke up in the middle of the night from this noise coming from downstairs. It sounded like something was scratching the back door. But when I got downstairs, the noise had stopped. But when I looked at the window facing the woods, there were footprints in the snow. But my aunt and uncle were really strict, and they had this rule that we weren't allowed to go in their room when they were sleeping. So I made sure all the doors were locked, and I decided I would tell them in the morning. The next morning we woke up and it was a really intense blizzard. Such heavy snowfall that we couldn't see the ground. So when I told my aunt and uncle about the footprints, they didn't believe me and told me it was probably a nightmare. The next day I had to leave, and I didn't go back and visit my cousins for a long time. But the next summer, my cousins really wanted me to come for their birthday party. Before visiting them, I looked up whether they had ever found the woman who had escaped from the hospital. And Google said that authorities were still looking for her and it was a high priority case. When I got to their house, I was playing with my cousins. They were about to turn 6 years old, and one of them goes, let's go check if she's there. And my cousin runs to the window facing the woods. So I asked my other cousin who she was talking about, and she goes, oh, don't worry, that's just her imaginary friend. But I knew that did not sound right.
Part 2 why you need a security system for your house. The house had 2 bedrooms on either hallway and a bathroom. The bedroom doors were closed, but the bathroom door was creaked open. I was so lucky in that moment because he sprinted to the bathroom. That gave me just enough time to open the attic access in my closet and pull myself out. As I looked at myself, I heard the person run towards my room. I had just pulled my feet inside when my bedroom door burst open. He walked in and stopped. When he didn't see me, he went into the other room. Then came back and turned on the light. A moment later, he ripped open my closet door. After a few seconds, he stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. Then he went downstairs. I had left my phone when I ran for the closet and wasn't sure I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I counted to 1,000, then climbed down to call the police. My bed had been flipped, furniture knocked over, and all my things destroyed. The only thing missing was a knife from my kitchen. The police found that the side door had been forced open by a crowbar. They also found cigarette butts and an empty tube used for drugs. They think he had been watching the house for a while. I installed some security in the house after this. I can't imagine what would have happened if he had come to my room first.
So it's Friday night, it's Roxy's birthday weekend, and we're all going to her house for the first time ever for our group sleepover. So we get there, and honestly, everything seemed really normal at first. Roxy's house was really nice, and honestly, I was confused why she never wanted us there before. So then we start making banana bread, and all of a sudden, Laura jumps and screams and runs to the other side of the kitchen. She's like, did you guys feel that? And we're all like, what are you talking about, Laura? She's She's like, I swear something just touched my lower back. And Laura's face turned really pale, like she was genuinely scared. And we spent the next hour convincing her that no one was there, no one touched her back. So then we start watching a movie, Disturbia. Shout out to Shia LaBeouf. And Mina goes to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she's like, Roxy, it looks like something upstairs is maybe leaking because there's this massive wet stain on the bathroom wall. And Roxy's like, oh, don't worry, that stain's always there. She's like, we actually can't figure out where it's coming from. We've had plumbers come and they can't figure it out either. There's no drain or pipe or anything that could be causing a leak at that part of the house anyway. And then Roxy says, but that's why we think our house is haunted. We all look at her kind of shocked and she's like, yeah, that's why I never invited you guys to sleep over because it can get kind of creepy. But honestly, at that point, I wasn't that creeped out until we went to bed because that's when stuff started getting